the future direction of Canada's armed forces is about to change. The question is how? And does lack of money in the federal budget limit what Canada's military can do? The federal government has promised a full review of Canada's defence policy by the end of this year. Until then, the military must deal with what is already on the table. The budget pushed off billions of dollars in procurement money to replace much-needed equipment like the aging CF-18s and purchase supply ships for Canada's Navy. That money will be spent in future years, according to the budget. With the shift in focus of the mission against ISIS from bombing to more trainers on the ground, questions have been raised about what the advise and assist mission really means and how much danger it might pose for troops. With the Prime Minister's promise to revitalize Canada's peacekeeping role, could Canadian soldiers be deployed to other dangerous areas in the world, like parts of Africa, where groups like Al-Qaeda and Boko Haram continue to launch attacks? So how will Canada's military need to change to meet these challenges, and how much will it cost to equip the Canadian forces for future missions? Joining me now, the Chief of the Defence Staff, General Jonathan Vance. Nice to see you, General. Appreciate you coming in.
Good to be here, Rosemary.
Okay, so you are at this stage waiting for the government's defence review, which they've promised by the end of the year. This is sort of going to give you a sense of where the military is going. It's sort of a white paper, I guess, for the future of the military. What do you want to see that look like? What kind of input are you giving them into what has to be in that document?
Well, I think first and foremost is the value of the public consultations that will go on. There'll be from average citizens through to expert groups and stakeholders. I think that will be honestly quite important to sort of frame where Canadians are in terms of the sense of their own defence and what the country needs to do. And I think thereafter is having the government be able to determine the baseline roles, missions and tasks of the Canadian Forces. I would expect, and the Minister has said it, where Defence of Canada, Defence of North America will likely endure. But I think where we want to see the emphasis and a lot of the effort made is what do we do in terms of expeditionary operations? What are the key things that Canada wants to be able to get done in the world that would affect military force structure or the tasks that we do?
So what kind of timeline then? They've said by the end of the year, and when you give them ideas, because obviously you want to hear from everybody, but when you give them ideas, how much of it is based on what you think the military should be doing or what you think the military needs?
Well, the process will include ongoing work inside the department to inform the decisions, whether it's costing or the kind of capabilities that would be required to get a particular effect done in the world. So I'll be engaged throughout. So from the point that it's announced all the way through to delivery, I'll be engaged along with the Deputy Minister, the senior staff. I'll also be soliciting from the military through the commanders, their views, and so we can bring to the table those things which we think are important. And ultimately, it's a government decision. So we'll have an opportunity to inform what may be considered as in the option set, but ultimately it's a government decision.
Are we expecting that to be announced as early as this week, potentially?
Yeah, it's in the minister's hands, and he's going to announce it soon, I believe.
Okay. And when you're giving an idea of what you want it to look like, do you do it backwards or forwards? And by that I mean, do you say, here's the things that we have, and so here's the things we could do? Or is it more, I think we should do these kinds of things, and that requires us to make these purchases and change the structure of the military?
Yeah, it's a great question because, we don't start from a blank sheet of paper. We have an armed forces now that's very successful operationally, that's busy in the world, that's meeting the objectives of the Government of Canada right now. The Defence Policy Review will largely look at the forces in the future. There will be, certainly in terms of the employment of the forces, the emphasis put on it in this Defence Policy Review as to where we would go even in the months and weeks and months to follow the release of the Policy Review. But a lot of the review will look at the longer term changes that the armed forces has to take. And so how that will be informed is a good solid look at the future security environment. What are we facing in the world? And then what does Canada want to be able to do in that very same world? which will then boil down into what are the military capabilities that we want to bring to bear.
Okay, so how do you do that then, knowing that the government has decided to put off procurement yet again, $3.7 billion off to future years? And I know that the ministers used words like reprofiling the money, which I'm sure you've heard before from other governments. How do you make decisions about what the military's role in the world is going to be when they've already made decisions about procurement? They're saying, like, it's not going to happen until 4 years down the road. How can you then offer them options for the military when they're not offering you equipment?
It's not quite that stark, to tell you the truth. The reprofiling is valid. That money has been moved to the right, at $3.7 billion, to where we can best spend the money. So to me, it's a valid move. There is not necessarily a direct correlation between the procurement that we're discussing that you've raised and the roles, missions, and tasks that the armed forces would undertake. We have equipment now. We spend billions every year on equipment and so on. So it's actually not quite as dramatic and drastic as some people would lead you to believe. That said, as we look at the future security environment out there in the 20, 30, 40-year time frame, what kind of armed forces does the country want? Informed by what kind of world are we going to be in and what does Canada want to achieve. So I believe right now that the reprofiling of that money into the procurement program doesn't affect our ability to ponder the future and ultimately determine what it is that we need to do. Then there's another set of decisions as to when that procurement would mature and we would actually get the equipment and the capability to do what the government would have us do.
Although you are the person who's going to have to say, well, if we're not getting this equipment until those decisions have been made and we're not getting it until 4 years down the road or what have you, you're the person that has to say to yourself, well, I've got to extend the life cycle of what we have. So is there any point where that becomes dangerous to extend the life cycle of that equipment, problematic for you? Do you have to make decisions based on, well, we'll maintain this piece of equipment but not this because I have to make sure it survives another X number of years because the money's not coming right away? Right.
So that's exactly right. We make decisions all the time about what equipment we use, how we use it, and for what reasons, and to maintain a competitive edge. The military arena is, as you can imagine, quite competitive. Not only because of the threats that we face, but also we want to perform well for the country. And so there are decisions that we make to extend equipment, to extend the life of equipment, and that's entirely acceptable. And but
difficult, I would imagine.
Sure, but just because it's hard doesn't mean it's bad. It is what we do. I think that where I am able to offer advice in confidence to government about where there are limitations in terms of what we can achieve. Sure. And that's also part of the process.
Okay, let's talk about some of the threats that you're talking about that are going to figure into this defense review policy, ISIS in particular. The first question, obviously the bombing has stopped. When are the additional trainers going to get there? When will you have more people on the ground?
The process is ongoing. We've conducted all of the reconnaissance that we need to do. We're working out now the bed down plan for how the forces will be sustained in theater, and I suspect that we'll be fully in theater, operating in the new mandate by the middle of the summer.
You talked when this shift in policy was announced about the risk of casualties. I would imagine at this stage you also now have an assessment of the risk of casualties. What should Canadians be prepared for?
Well, we always do these sorts of assessments, and it's ongoing, evergreen. We're always aware. I think it's been said before, and I'll say it again, that this is a dangerous mission in a dangerous place. Even though we're in the train, advise, and assist role, we are with those who are facing an existential threat and supporting them to the best of our ability. So Canadians need to be prepared for the fact that there will be confrontation, there will be fighting. I'm certain of it. There has been already. This represents an expansion of the mission on the ground. So it stands to reason that there will be fighting and potentially casualties as we face this mission.
And why should I not interpret that as combat?
Well,
and how useful a conversation is that? Because it's something that people talk about a lot, and I don't know if it's something that consumes people over there, but how useful a conversation is it to try and define it as combat or not?
I don't find it all that useful. The way this has been described and debated in the public space tends to be a bit sloppy with language. I've been very clear, as has the minister and the prime minister, that we're expecting there to be fighting. If you want to take the word fighting and make that synonymous with combat, fine by me. The intent of the mission, at the mission level, what's this mission for, is to train, advise, and assist a force. It almost does a disservice to us if you were to describe this as a combat mission when we're going in to train, advise, and assist. If this was a combat mission, we'd be going in a very different way with very different purpose to conduct offensive and defensive operations, ultimately to provide those tactical victories. We're working through and with another nation to provide them the support necessary to be able to conduct their combat operations. It's new. It's not something that people are used to talking about. So when you say, hey, the troops will be in combat, synonymous with fighting, synonymous with engagement, synonymous with the fact that they'll be requiring on occasion to defend themselves, absolutely. When you're using the rules of engagement that allow you to defend yourself and you're fighting, it's combat. But it's not a combat mission. Again, I say, if it was a combat mission, we'd be doing things very differently with very different objectives. Right now, we're supporting, through a train, advise, and assist function, those forces that are in combat. So to me, it doesn't make that much sense. The troops get the same allowances, the same hazard pay, the same risk, the same respect, the same medals. I mean, for anybody to suggest that because of how it's been framed that somehow the troops aren't going to be treated as well, I find that offensive.
But it's still dangerous.
It is, and we've said that from the very beginning. We've said it's dangerous.
Is it more dangerous than what you were doing?
It's just on a larger scale. There's more of us, so more opportunity for danger. And it's dangerous, but it's worthwhile doing. We're going to be supporting a country facing this incredible threat against ISIL, and we will be on the ground in a very key part of the country to help ensure that ISIL is in fact militarily defeated in Iraq. So I'm confident that we've been, and I've been clear, I think everybody's been clear, that it is dangerous. And we don't want to ever take away from the fact or somehow hide the fact, nobody has, that it's going to be dangerous. They can defend themselves. They will defend themselves. And they will acquit themselves well when they do so. They will support the Peshmerga and help in their defense, because we extend self-defense to those who we are supporting. So I think Canadians can reasonably expect that there will be fighting occur for the purposes of defense of our own people and of the Kurds.
A couple more questions. We've seen some inroads made in Syria by the coalition recently. Palmyra, I know that there's a plan to retake Mosul as well in Iraq. Do you think that the defeat of ISIS is in sight, possible, that we are getting closer? How do you characterize that fight right now?
I don't think it's in sight. I mean, I think we're thinking through the problem. We understand more and more. And when you say ISIS or ISIL or Daesh, it comes in many forms. There's the core, and I know you've talked with others about this. There's the core ISIL that lives in and works in Iraq and Syria. That absolutely needs to be defeated, and I'm confident that all the steps are being taken right now, including with the Canadian mission, to see to the military defeat of ISIL in Iraq. And I use the term military defeat because there are many other things that have to happen for this phenomenon to be defeated completely.
Political things.
Political, social, the social, political, and economic fabric of that nation has to be put back together again. And that's toxic to people like Daesh. That said, it has its branches, it has its aspirations outside of the core region, existing now in the Sinai, in Libya, popping up, targeting people in Europe, and so on, and potentially into North America. So there is a wider effort that in the counterterror world that needs to work at defeating this across the board, including countering the messaging, seeking those root causes and trying to incentivize people to either leave the fight or not go in the first place.
I don't want to let you go before asking about peacekeeping, because I know you were in Bosnia. Were you
in Croatia.
Yeah, in Croatia. So the Prime Minister has now sort of brought that language back into the Canadian, currency, if you will, and he's talked about revitalizing peacekeeping. I think everyone agrees that it can't exist the way that it did, right? It's no longer that because of some of the things you've been talking about. What should Canadians think of now when we think of peacekeeping? And are you at a stage where you are looking at places and saying to the government, here are some places where we could legitimately go, Mali, for instance, or maybe perhaps Libya? What does that look like in your mind?
Well, we are always looking at the world and all of the military missions, UN or otherwise, that occur in the world. So we maintain situational awareness across the board always, no matter what.
Okay.
In this case, the peacekeeping function is actually maturing. It's evolving within the UN. And if you think of the spectrum of conflict, I don't want to get too technical here, but if you want to prevent conflict or stabilize after there's been conflict or seek to interpose forces, all of that is possible within the UN. So it's one of the organs in the world, one of the bodies in the world where legitimate use of military can take place. Otherwise, it can occur as a result of a nation requesting support from a coalition, or it can happen in an alliance.
Right.
In this case, I think it's great that we have the opportunities now to ponder conflict prevention, stabilization, try to get left of the real serious problems of open warfare and conflict. It would be good to, through the good offices of the Secretary General and for the UN, to be able to prevent a failing state from failing,
right.
To prevent conflict from going wider. Prevent it in the first place. And
you see places where we could go and do that, like
I do.
In the world? Yeah.
I do. And one of the things about working through the UN is it needs to improve too, and there's always efforts to do that, and I hope Canadian leadership in this regard can help. But we need to think seriously about conflict resolution. It's not just a matter of going to fight. Fighting has to lead to something. And the UN is one of those bodies that allows for the various pathways through a more holistic, connected approach with government and economics and so on, to make certain that there is some decent chance at resolution of the conflict in the first place. So I think as we are looking broadly at the world, there are plenty of UN missions ongoing, and I'm assessing them right now, and we'll provide advice to government as to where it is that we may.
Last question. Is Libya a place where we should have done a better job in maintaining the peace and stabilizing the country before we left it?
Well, looking in hindsight, of course.
Yeah, I know that's a hard one.
It is hard, and so it's a bit unfair. I think we understand better now that in conflict where there's no certainty of the emergence of institutions of government, like we
nothing
saw
to fill the vacuum.
That's right. And like Afghanistan,
yeah.
That care needs to be taken to not only achieve that military kinetic sort of condition setting where better things can happen, you also have to engineer and support those better things occurring. And so I can't really comment on whether or not Libya was done well or not, but we see the challenge now in Libya, and it's a state that needs a great deal of support. I'm happy to see the GNA has arrived, but it's going to take some time before that country's put back together. And there may very well be international missions that are contemplated. We're working on maintaining situational awareness right now, understanding it in the event that we're asked to come up with options.
Okay, General, we covered a lot of ground. I appreciate your time very much. Hope you'll come back. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rosemary.